know about you, but I find the evolution of social media fascinating, really. If you guys have followed anything with Facebook transitioning to Meta, or I don't know if you want to just mess with your mind for a little bit, go look up Web3 or Metaverse and see what the projections are for the next 5 or 10 years of where social media, of where the internet is going. And it will really just, if you're anything like me, it will blow your mind. Because I remember when Facebook first came out, and at the time I was in college, and it was only for college students. You had to have a .edu email address to be able to sign up for Facebook, and it was incredible. I remember when our school got it, and everybody was excited, and we signed up, and we got our account, and we didn't know what we were doing, but we started doing it because everybody was doing it, and we had to do it. And so it was fun, it was new, it was different. And if you may remember, even before Facebook, there was something called MySpace. And if you're not familiar with MySpace, it was really the first thing that allowed everyone to have a personal web page where they could just talk about themselves, thus the name MySpace. And it was the best thing that ever happened was when MySpace lets you choose your own song for your page. And so it was like having your own walk-up song, when you're batting in the professional. It was just crazy because all of a sudden you could just post a song and put your picture next to it and tell people about yourself, and they could come visit your page. They come visit your space. And then over the years, social media continued to grow and continued to advance in technology. And there's companies like Twitter and YouTube and Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all these things. And it just continued to grow, and they continued to just push the boundaries of technology when it came to social media, specifically, really when it came to photo and videos and the editing of those. Because early on, social media was more of a verbal communication tool, right? But now it's become dominated by photos. It's become dominated by videos. And there are certain aspects of that I really, really appreciate the development of those things, because I've got family all across the country. I've got nieces and nephews. We are spread out as far as you can go, and I don't ever get to see them. And so social media is wonderful because I can see my nieces and nephews grow up. I can keep up with my brothers. My parents are in Colorado, so we can keep up with each other as all of those things are going on, and I get to watch them grow, right? And somehow I can feel closer to them with having even less of a connection with them, having less physical interaction, having less of a relationship. Somehow now I feel closer with them because of social media. And so thanks to all the photos, thanks to all the videos, we get more chances than ever to interact with people or see people or watch people grow up who we would never have the chance to do otherwise. Right? But at the same time, there's a piece of that makes me a little nervous, specifically when it comes to my children, because the impact that social media has on culture is astounding. It's ridiculous how social media has begun to drive culture, right? The image that people portray and what people will post for fame or for popularity is alarming on some levels, right? And I think about my children, I think about even with their limited interaction, the impact that it already has. And as they get older and as they begin to get on different social media platforms, like I'm concerned with what it's going to teach them about how they have to act, what it's going to teach them about how they see themselves, how they have to dress, how they have to behave in order to be liked by other people, right? My daughters are 8 and 9. In fact, my 8-year-old turned 8 today. It's her birthday. And they're both already concerned on some level with how they look when they go out the door for school in the morning, right? Even my 6-year-old son, he has mornings where we're like, nope, it's got to be this way. And we're like, fine, whatever. It's normally related to sports at that point. But my 9-year-old, she's in 4th grade. And if her outfit doesn't come together for the morning or her hair isn't just right before she leaves, it's going to be a bad morning. And it's really bad now that Melinda's working because she leaves before I do. And I'm like, I got nothing with how to fix your hair. Ponytail, but that's the extent of where I can go, right? And I had 3 brothers growing up, so we didn't have all those problems. I'm still learning how to deal with having 2 girls because we're like, cool, rub some dirt on it and let's go, we're fine, right? But the truth is that all of us all of us want to be seen a certain way, right? There's a reason that even though it was, it's been cold this weekend, I didn't come in sweatpants and a hoodie, even though that would have been really comfortable, right? There's a reason that I shaved this morning, and it goes beyond just being professional, right? And putting that look out there, right? There's more to it than that. And as much as I don't like to admit it, like, here's how I know that there's more to it. There's more to it than how I want people to see me, other than just the professional side of things, right? A while back, my wife posted a picture on Facebook. I think it was a couple years ago now. And one of my friends was trying to be funny. And so he made a comment like, hey, as you get older, like, certain physical traits just change. And so he made a comment about one of my physical traits that was less than flattering. And my wife, Melinda, she did the amazing wife thing where she just let him know that was not acceptable. And that post disappeared from the page, which was, it's magical how that happened, right? And so if that was the end of the story, that would be perfectly fine. It would be all good. But my wife's frustration from the fact that my friend bothered to do that just continues to just bubble underneath, for years now. And so from time to time, she tells this story, when it's appropriate or whenever it comes up, and she's like, I can't believe that listen to what this guy did. And every time she does, she repeats the comment that he made. And self-consciously, I've just got this thing growing inside of me where I'm like, that hurts more now. And you're saying it and telling new people. And every time she tells it, I'm just I can't deal with it. So eventually I had to just say, hey, can we just stop telling that story? Or if you feel the need to tell that story, because I love what you did, I appreciate you defending me, could you just not say what the comment was? There's this whole self-conscious thing where I can't deal with it anymore, right? And so can you just stop drawing attention to it? Because now you've created really more of a monster than what he did with his original comment. That would have been gone. Now I'm just reliving it all of the time. And now I'm just telling it on stage, and all y'all are just looking at me going, well, I wonder which one of the things that is bothering him so much, right? But we all have those things, right? We all have those things that we would rather other people not see, right? Maybe it's a physical trait. Maybe it's something as you get older and something changes, right? Maybe it's a mannerism that you do. Maybe it's a thought or thoughts that you have. Maybe it's actions. And we just would rather people just not see them or at least not draw attention to them, right? And because we do all pay attention to how other people see us, right? And on some level or another, we are all concerned with how others see us. We are all concerned with how others see us. And that affects some of us more than others, right? Probably a lot to do with the stage of life that you're in, right? And for some of us, we have a group of people that we're more comfortable around, and there are certain environments that we're less concerned with this than others, right? But in certain settings and around certain people, we want to be perceived a certain way, right? And sometimes it's just as simple as hey, make sure we brushed our hair and put on the right clothes, right? But other times it's a little more involved. It goes beyond just putting our best foot forward. It becomes almost really pretending that things aren't the way that they are, right? It's either that we're trying to now be something that we aren't, or maybe aren't anymore, or maybe it's that we're trying to hide something that we don't want to be at all, right? And this happens on social media all of the time. And I know that none of you do this, but there are people out there who will just take picture after picture after picture, specifically selfie after selfie after selfie, until they get the perfect picture. They'll take dozens of pictures just to get that one perfect picture. And if they're still not happy with it, there's filters and there's editing so that they can control how it is that other people see them, right? And in real life, it's even more difficult than that, because instead of editing pictures, we have to edit our persona, right? We have to put on different masks around different people, around different groups. And sometimes we do this really just as an attempt to fit in, right? We find ourselves talking differently or behaving differently than we normally would. And maybe it's not trying to fit in. Maybe it's trying not to stand out. We don't want people to see certain things. We're trying to hide something that's going on in our lives, or something that we just would rather other people not know about, right? And so maybe it's your marriage is going through some bumps, and so you mask up, and when you're around certain people, you just pretend like everything's fine, but when you get back home or get in the car, it's just not working for you. Maybe it's we just don't know what to do with our kids sometimes. Like, how do we deal with the things that they're going through? How do we try to raise them in a certain way? And it just doesn't seem to work. So we mask up when we're around other people. And then again, we get home or we get in the car and it's just like, what were you thinking? Like, I can't believe that you did that. Or just as a parent, like, I am absolutely lost on how to make this work the way that I think it should. Sometimes maybe it's just our finances have gotten a little unstable, a little unsteady. We've gone through a rough time, and instead of changing how we live or doing things a little differently when we're around other people, we don't want them to know that, that sort of a thing. We get a little embarrassed, and so we just keep living the way we are and hope that, we can just ride this out and everything will be fine on the other end of it, because we're just afraid of what other people will say in some of those situations, right? And other times, maybe it's not about being embarrassed. Maybe it's not about being ashamed at all. Maybe it's just that we don't want to have to deal with it in that moment, right? It's too heavy. It's too big. It's been weighing on you too long. It's too messy. And you just need a break from having to think about it and having to deal with it. So we sweep it under the rug. We pretend that it's not there. And we just want to keep people out of that part of our life. So we mask up, right? We don't want people to see us that way. But if we're not careful, we can take that same approach with God. And if you don't believe in God, then maybe this doesn't apply to you. But if you're a Jesus follower or even somebody who is part of another religion, we're not just concerned with how others see us. We're concerned with how we think God sees us. And I say think God sees us because as silly as it sounds, when we do this, we're trying to hide part of our lives from God as if He can't see it. And we treat it as if God, hey, God, just do not look at this part of my life over here. I've got to hide this from you, right? We separate our lives into different compartments and into different boxes. And over here we have our God and our church box, and we put everything in there that needs to be in there. But then we have this whole other box, or maybe multiple boxes over here where we put all of our other things, right? And when we think about God, we think about Him in this box, and we leave Him out of all of this over here. We leave Him out of all of these boxes over here. God, just do not look in these boxes over here. You can see anything you want to see over here. Just look away. Like pretend like that isn't there. But it gets even more complicated than that, because not only are we concerned with how others see us, right? Not only are we concerned with how we think that God sees us. Now, depending on which box we are in and who we are with, now we're concerned with how we think others think God sees us, right? We have to sort out not only what is in each box, but who is in each box. And these people can only see what's in this box, and these people can only see what's in this box. And there's a few people that maybe can see what's in both boxes, but there's some things that we don't want anybody to see in that box, right? We end up wearing different masks. We end up swapping our masks depending on who we're around, depending on what's going on, what situation we're in, half trying to fit in, half trying to hide. And it's nothing new. It's nothing new. People have been doing this for years and years, for a long, long time. And in fact, there's a story in Mark chapter 7 where Jesus addresses this very thing in some of the religious leaders of the day. And Mark was a companion of Peter who traveled with Jesus, and it's believed and really accepted that Mark's gospel, what he wrote, was really an account of Peter's time that he spent with Jesus. And so in Mark chapter 7, Jesus and his disciples had been traveling around. Jesus had been healing people. He's been having these great crowds, teaching them. There's been all of these miracles. And so in some of their downtime, they get a different group of visitors that stop by. And it says this in Mark chapter 7, verse 1. The Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus. And so as often was the case, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the teachers of the law, had come together, and they were there to see what was going on with Jesus. They were concerned about this new movement. They were concerned about Jesus drawing these crowds everywhere he went. More and more people gathered around them. His following was growing. And so now Jesus has a different crowd that finds him, a different crowd that surrounds him. And most crowds, they were there for the miracles. They were there for the teaching. They were there to be healed. But this crowd was not there to learn. This crowd was there to judge. They were experts in the law, experts in the Old Testament scriptures, and they were there to scrutinize Jesus, to analyze what he and his disciples were doing. And as usual, they found something that they didn't like. And so as they gathered around Jesus, they saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. And so as a parent of kids, like small kids, I can appreciate on some level what's going on here. You know, like, hey, do you remember where you were 5 minutes ago? You might want to wash your hands. Like, definitely just go wash your hands. I don't care that you've eaten 5 bites already. Just go get up, wash your hands, right? That makes sense for kids. But for adults, like this hits on a little bit different of a level. I don't, like, if you think about this, play this out in your mind. Like, you're sitting down at a restaurant, nice restaurant. Somebody comes, sits at the table next to you, and, you know, they've got their menu they're ordering, and then their food comes, and they never got up to go wash their hands. I don't know, like, when the last time you've just, like, nodded over or just, hey, excuse me, I happen to notice that you didn't go wash your hands, and you are now defiled. So if you want to go handle that, like, you don't do that with adults. Even if you thought it, like, there's probably some times where I've been like, that person probably needs to wash their hands. I would never actually say something to another adult about this, right? This can be kind of a weird scenario if you aren't familiar with what's going on here. And so Mark, one of the great things about Mark wrote to a non-Jewish audience, primarily knowing he was writing to non-Jews. Some of the Gospels are written to primarily a Jewish audience who would understand everything that's going on. Mark is writing to a non-Jewish audience. And so he includes a little bit extra so that we can understand what's happening here. He says, the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders, right? So this was not a question of hygiene. This was not a question really of if their hands were clean or if they were dirty. It was not a question if had they washed at all. This was a question of had they washed the right way. There's this whole Jewish ceremony where there's a pitcher and hands. And so first you go with your hands pointed up and they pour the water over your hands and the water has to run off your wrists. But then they flip their fingers down and they do it again and the water has to run off your fingers. And I've watched enough hospital shows to know that that is not the right thing to do, right? If you scrub in, you got to leave these things up or else you're not sterile anymore. So, like, joke's on them. They had the wrong system going, but they were very adamant on it that, hey, you have to do it this way. There's more to the process than that, but as it turns out, right, this ceremonial washing isn't even in the Old Testament scriptures, right? It's not part of the law. It's in part of something called the tradition of the elders, right? And the tradition of the elders really is more laws and more interpretations of the scripture that people had added over time. And actually it had come to supplant the Old Testament and the scriptures in some ways as the highest authority in Judaism. So in other words, what they're saying is, why aren't you doing what God says you have to do the way that we say you have to do it? Right? Again, this was not about hygiene. This was not about religious law. This was, in a sense, this was a show. This was a mask of sorts. Because when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash, right? This was about when they're out and about among the common people, among the less spiritual people, among the unclean people. They would not eat unless they did this ceremonial washing of their hands. This was a way of separating themselves from other people. It was a way, really, of considering themselves better than certain people. They put on their ceremonial PPE so they don't get their spiritual cooties, right? They couldn't fathom it being any other way. So the Pharisees and the teachers of the law asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands?" Now, it can get a little messy when you begin to tell God how to interpret his own laws, right? If they only knew who they were talking to. But they ask him, "Hey, why is it that you don't live according to these traditions? Why is it that you're not doing this? Why doesn't your life look the way that we think it should look? Why don't your boxes line up with our boxes?" Right? We saw what they did eating with defiled hands. If they do that, what other kind of wild lifestyle are they living? Right? We would never be caught doing that. You can't really be a good Jew and do that. It's just not allowed. Look, Jesus, if you want our support, if you want our approval, if you want to be associated with our God, you're going to have to play by our rules. Why don't they wash? Tell us. And since they asked, Jesus answered. It just wasn't the answer that they were looking for. He replied, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites." Isaiah is a prophet from the Old Testament, from the very scriptures that they're supposed to be experts in. And Jesus takes that, and what he's about to do is he's about to disprove their whole religious system. He's about to say, hey, everything you've built this on is wrong. Right? But before he does that, he uses this interesting word. The Greek word here is hypocrites. It's where we get our English word hypocrites. And what it refers to is a stage actor. Specifically, an actor who wears a mask, an actor who pretends to be someone else. And as he challenges these Pharisees, as he challenges these teachers, these experts of the law, he calls them actors, pretenders, people hiding behind a mask. And he continues, "As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." So just like Isaiah prophesied, Jesus now applies it to these Pharisees, these experts, these teachers of the law. He says, you've become the very thing you despise. You designed a religious system in order to accuse others and in order to honor yourselves. And what you've ended up doing is accusing yourself and dishonoring God as a result. Right? You talk the talk, you walk the walk, you put on a really good show, but it's for your own benefit. It was not for God's benefit. He says, they worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions. Jesus applies these words of Isaiah and says, your worship is meaningless. Your worship is pointless to God. Right? It's not about keeping his commands. It's about keeping up appearances. It's about fitting in and pushing others out. It's about hiding behind a mask of human tradition that you came up with because they had let go of what matters and they had grabbed a hold of something altogether different. They were more concerned. They were more concerned with how others saw them. They were more concerned with how they thought God saw them. And they were more concerned with how they thought others thought God saw them. But they didn't really give much thought or concern to how God himself actually saw them. It's easy to read this, right? It's easy to hear this story and think, man, what a bunch of fools. What is wrong with them? Why can't they see that, right? They should know better, especially like they're going up against Jesus. What were they thinking, right? But it doesn't take long to look into history maybe to look into church history, maybe to look into our personal history and find similar stories, right? Now, I don't know what your experience was growing up, if you grew up in church or what kind of church you grew up in, but for me, growing up, like there was sort of this unspoken, unintended consequence of the way that I was taught to be a Christian, right? Follow these certain rules and keep away from people that don't, right? Separate yourself. So the church has been good. Church has been good at putting on masks for a long time. Like even before COVID was a thing, the church was putting on masks when you came in the door, right? Because we were taught, like, church is a holy place. You got to be buttoned up. You got to have everything put together. And even if your life is a mess, right? Just pretend it's all fine. Get it together while you're at church. No, church is no place for your mess, right? Leave that at home. It's okay to pray for your neighbor's dog or your sick grandmother or maybe like your friends' kids that are like making bad choices. But you better have it together. Don't let anyone behind your mask. Don't let anyone see your hurt, your fear, your loneliness, your addictions. Right? If you were living right, you really wouldn't have any of those things anyway. So we put on our masks when we go to church. And when we put on our masks, it teaches others to put on a mask as well. When we start doing those things and hiding certain things, it teaches others to sort of copy that, do the same thing and push everything aside and hide it, right? And that's one of the things I love about our small groups, because it provides this great opportunity to take off a mask. It's why we say that circles are better than rows. Because when you get in a circle, when you get in with a group of people and you sign up for a new group or you launch with a group for the first time, it takes some time to get to know each other, to build trust, to build relationships, to be comfortable. But at some point in that group, in one of those discussions, something changes. Maybe somebody's going through a difficult time. Maybe there's a specific question and a specific study. Somebody takes that first step to pull off their mask. And from that moment, the group changes completely. The group opens up and now we get into real issues. I know that in some of my small groups, I can point to the moment where somebody just takes off their mask for the first time and takes that step and is willing to open up. And what you generally find out is that whether it's that issue or another issue, like everybody's going through something similar or has gone through something similar, but for some reason we were just all too embarrassed or ashamed or unwilling to talk about it in that group. But the first time somebody does, it changes how that group interacts. It changes how that group and everybody in that group grows from that point on. And so at church, we try to create environments where people don't have to wear masks, right? A place where you can belong before you believe, where it's okay to have questions, where it's even okay to believe different things than we do, where you don't have to have it all together. You don't have to have life figured out because life is messy, life is complicated, and you want to get it right, and I want to get it right. And at church, we just want to help people to get life right, to encourage them towards that direction. And we try our best not to judge anybody, but just encourage them to, hey, take your next step, find out what your next step is, and take that next step. But from time to time, I still find myself reaching for some of my masks, putting those on, like as we all do, really. And it's not always just for other people. Sometimes I put on a mask for God too, right? And there's any number of reasons that I do that. Maybe it's sometimes that just something's going on and I feel like I've got to earn God's love and acceptance for whatever reason. I just feel like I've got to do something more for God. And so I put on a mask. Sometimes we're in a situation that we're trying to behave our way out of, or maybe in a situation where we want to change, so we try to behave our way into a different situation. So we just throw on this mask and just pretend like everything's fine, or just pretend like if we continue to do what we think we're supposed to do, things will get better. Sometimes if there's guilt involved, we just throw on that mask and we think, hey, I don't want to make God look bad, so I'm just going to put this mask on so that other people can't see that, right? I'm supposed to have it all together. Sometimes we assume like there's some kind of spiritual competition where if like these people are doing this, then we have to do this same thing. And even if it's not, like we've got to be the best Christian or the best version of a Christian, whatever that means. Sometimes we feel maybe like a spiritual failure, or we don't feel spiritual at all. And so we just put on this mask and are like, everything's fine. I'm here. We're great. And every time that we put on a spiritual mask, right, we're trying to influence how God sees us, trying to influence how others see us. But the truth is this, putting on a mask is less about what others see and more about what we see. Our compulsion to put on a spiritual mask is usually associated somehow with how we see God or how we see ourselves. It's less about how others see us. It's about how we see things. It's about what we see, right? Maybe it's because of how we see God that we think he's out there just waiting to judge us. Like we just know that if we mess up again, like we're just going to lose our opportunity with him, or that he's just there to, just watch everything and scrutinize everything. And as soon as we mess up, like he's gonna punish us, he's gonna smite us, whatever that means, right? So we mask up, we try to blend in with everyone else so we don't stand out to God, and we assume that no one else is going through the same thing that we're going through. Maybe it's not our view of God that causes us to mask up. Maybe it's our view of ourselves. Whatever we've done or whatever we've failed to do, we just can't picture ourselves being loved or accepted. Right? So we mask up, and again, we just try to blend in. We try to hide our feelings from God and from other people. We try to pretend that we're fine. And we think if we pretend long enough, maybe it'll just work itself out and we'll actually be doing what we're supposed to be doing. Maybe one day we'll stop messing up. We'll start doing better. Maybe one day we'll be worthy of love. Maybe one day we'll be worthy of acceptance, and we won't need that mask at all, right? Maybe as Jesus followers, we hear verses like 2 Corinthians 5:17, where it talks about being a new creation, and the old is gone and the new has come. And we're just not convinced that worked for us for some reason, right? It doesn't feel any different. My struggles are still my struggles. My temptations are still my temptations. I still find myself doing the same thing. And we start wondering, like, why? Why didn't it work? Did maybe I do it wrong? Like, did I not have this together? Like, am I missing a piece? Like, if I can just get this one thing right, then everything will be better. Right? So I better just put on this mask. Better just put on this mask until I figure it out. But what if putting on the mask is the very thing that keeps you from becoming the person that you want to become? What if like the Pharisees, when you put on that mask and when you go through those motions, it's really just making it work? What if your hiding and pretending is more of a distraction, like a self-medicated spiritual problem? I'll just do this. I'll just try to get by with this, but you never find yourself getting better, but at least others can't see the symptoms as much. What if there was a way to find moving past the pretending? Right? What if something as simple as changing your perspective could give you the freedom to put your masks down? Where would we even start with something like that? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about over the next couple of weeks as we continue this series, The Masquerade. Right? And so you want to make sure that you're here over the next 2 weeks as we get really practical about what causes us to want to put on that mask and what it is that God does to free us to be able to put that down. Right, but before we go, we've got 3 questions to help continue the discussion, maybe over lunch or maybe with your small group, or If you're in one of those, first question is this: what group of people are you most likely to mask up around, and why? Is there a group of people that when you're around them, you just find yourself putting on a mask, acting a little differently? Number two, have you ever felt pressured to put on a show around other Christians? Have you ever felt like other Christians were putting on a mask around you? Be careful with that one when you talk about it. Why do you think that was? Number three, has the way you viewed God or yourself caused you to mask up in your personal relationship with God? What contributed to that view?